Morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy. Good morning. It is Saturday, May 30th, and I'm heavy this morning, but I'm here. So I hope I look okay, but I'm here. Last night here in Atlanta, we saw protests, we saw rioting, we saw looting. There's a lot of unease, a lot of unrest, and I'm heavy this morning because I know that where we are will take a move of God, and it's going to take people to collectively come together to address the roots of all of this. And the root of this, is systemic, is generational. It is white supremacy. And I'm going to start this morning out with Mr. Ken Williams. He is always a friend to this broadcast, and he is a police whistleblower. Good morning, Mr. Ken.
Good morning. Good morning, Tamara. Thank you for having me.
We're heavy here in Atlanta, and we're heavy across the nation. And to watch, you call it a murder. I think I saw a lynching. The only thing they didn't do was string him up to a tree. And I'm heavy. And I know you see this from a different perspective, because introduce yourself, because of those that don't know that you were a former police officer. So I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Certainly. My name is Ken Williams. I'm a retired homicide detective. I also have a use of force police practices consultancy, expert witness consultancy business that I have, where I get hired to assess wrongful deaths, whether it be the state government that hires me or private citizens through their private attorney that hire me to assess, review, and make an assessment based on actions that ultimately led to someone's demise. I make a decision and I testify about those things.
You've been watching, I know, I'm sure you have watched it from many angles.
The video of Mr. George Floyd's lynching, murder, is a very traumatic video to watch for anyone. I mean, especially a person like myself who has unfortunately had to go and watch many types of murders and stuff in the review of my professional business. But the thing about George Floyd's murder is that it was captured by video of concerned citizens that came to his aid, saw several police officers stop, question, frisk Mr. Floyd, arrest him, and what brought their attention to this act, unlike maybe many other acts, was that they started to witness what they saw was excessive force. An unarmed black man on the ground and a white male officer placing his knee on the neck of Mr. Floyd and not willing to get his knee off the neck of Mr. Floyd drew the ire of those citizens to the point where, we also have to commend them for having the wherewithal to whip out a camera to video record their interactions with police. Because without that video, none of us would be outraged, because the police would have given us a completely different fabricated story in the end. So watching that video for the several minutes, I'm shocked, dismayed, and angered by what I saw. And I understand why other people are pissed off.
We're hurting. And I think watching that, for me, it shows. And then I saw on the news where they're using his pre-existing condition as a possible defense to why or why he died. It shows me, Ken, that it makes you feel like we will never be able to win against this. Like, racism, white supremacy is so ingrained that we can never get past it. They will always have anything, any lie, any reason will do anything.
I think at this point it's important for us to recategorize, reclassify what we're seeing. You have to decide in your lifetime whether you're white or black, whether you represent good or evil. And there were good citizens on that street corner, all races, creeds, nationalities, that saw something, witnessed it. And they were good citizens, and they tried to intervene as best they could without getting shot themselves or killed that day themselves. Mr. Floyd was the guy that was subjected to the aggressive nature of these officers who, after it was all said and done, collectively went into a room and figured out how they would put pen to paper and continue to perpetuate the lie. None of them came forward and said, you know, this officer used excessive force after the fact. None of them during the time that the officer was using excessive force told the officer, cut the shit, get off his neck. None of the officers, days after this release of this video by these concerned citizens, came forward to change their tune. So we have a problem in America, and it's simply good versus evil. I don't care if you're a good cop or bad cop. If you saw something, see something, and you remain silent, you're complicit.
Good morning, David.
Morning. Sorry about that. Yes, I concur very wholeheartedly. That's I think that one of the things that might be going on is what Karl Marx called superstitious reverence for the state. I wonder why those people who were there did not have an impulse to collective action to intervene. I mean, there must have been 4 or 5 people that were standing there. So that's one thing, but that puts the burden on a number of people who are, maybe almost all people of color. I don't know. I mean, we couldn't see. All we know is that that the young woman who was using her smartphone camera was African American, I think. But it seems to me that one of the things that we need to do, maybe, and this I defer to you on this, is disarm the police. I mean, they just should not be carrying around weapons.
He used his knee, so his weapon.
I know, but if this is exactly what Ken is saying. I mean, people were afraid they would get shot, and if those officers were required to have their weapons locked in their cars, all right, and call in somewhere, to a superior or something and say, we believe that this is a situation that requires us to be armed,
So let's ask Ken, because he is the expert. Ken, what kind of policies, what kind of changes need to happen in law enforcement so that we can stop this? What needs to happen?
I don't think that you can restrict access to a firearm, because we go back to the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment, since it was born, established the right to bear arms. And in this country, if you're hired to, be a police officer, the officers are trained. There's no issue of training here. There's no issue that there's a lack of training. There's no issue that there's a lack of supervision. What we have here are some people who are hired in this profession that are criminals. They're wearing a badge, a uniform. They're ordained by that state, that jurisdiction, or that local municipality to go out and conduct certain business, and they violate the rights. They target specific people. They violate their rights. And at the end of the day, some people die. And at the end of the day, it's going to have to be those officers and those citizens that come together and they root out this evil that is amongst us. These people who are within the rank and file of law enforcement, and there are many of them, let's make no mistake about it, they have to be gone. After Mr. Floyd's death, it makes no sense to me that it took 96 hours for the district attorney to put together a 3.5-page report identifying probable cause to arrest a murderer. We had a murderer at large in the community for 96 hours that we could all look at on a videotape that clearly committed murder, had accessories to his murder, and aided in his prevention of being captured based on police reports. We have a serious problem.
Can the only problem I have with that approach is that, for example, this officer Chauvin was he shot 2 people already, you know, in 07 and 2011. I mean, he clearly has. This is not just, you know, one situation. He has repeated complaints against him. So there's something that's more. It's the institution itself seems to me, and I'm talking about every police force, and there are what 17,000 police forces in the United States, huh? You know, so every one of them has an institutional framework that makes it possible for these guys to not only to get away with it within their police force, but if they're ever what do you call it, fired, they get jobs somewhere else. So, you know, I think we really have something more institutional. The other part of the institution is these patrolmen's benevolent associations, you know, and I just was seeing in the New York Times has an editorial saying that the Supreme Court has given however many years ago qualified immunity to police officers, so that you know, they are not personally liable for what they do. So there's a whole institutional framework here, and I think that it's summed up by this law professor, African American law professor Elie Mystal, who's a columnist for The Nation, and he says there's only one conclusion: white America likes its killer cops. You know,
as long as they're killing black people.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the point that he's making, is that now you can't read expressions, you know, on people's face that say, you know, what they're thinking, but that expression on the face of that Chauvin while he's on George Floyd's neck, he's looking directly into the camera, and he's saying, "I dare you to do something." It seems to me, you know. Because
it's
he
important.
knows
It's important for us to not just look at the expression on his face. He had his hands in his pocket. He had his knee on this man's neck. He not only had his knee on his neck for a few seconds, he had his knee on his neck for minutes. Yeah. 2 minutes prior to the EMTs arriving, Mr. Floyd was non-responsive. We have citizens on a video recording that are saying to the police, "Let me give you notice. The person that you guys have there on the ground is no longer talking or breathing. What are you guys going to do about it?" The officers, none of them reacted to the fact that Mr. Floyd was no longer responsive. They are all culpable. They are all responsible. Now, in terms of the danger, we have to unfortunately go back to history, because if we start trying to go and talk about 2020 as being the history, this country was founded on white people who went after black people for profit in an industry that controlled one group and not all groups similarly. We also have the fact that the Militia Act, as we have already discussed in history, was a first act of Congress that said every able-bodied white male aged 18 to 45 would bear arms in this country to control 100% of the black population who were restricted from bearing arms according to the same law. The same group of people who are subjected to heinous acts of terrorism by white patriots in this country for control and profit. We went through that cycle for several hundred years. So this idea that we all of a sudden can only look at George Floyd as the beacon of having a discussion about the ills, the terroristic acts, the institutional racism, we've got to come full circle on this thing and understand it is a priority for the good citizens of this country, unless you want another civil war, to cut the shit and start turning in these bad people. They're criminals.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I agree with you pretty much, completely. I think that the history also includes the fact that poor whites were used by that system, and they became deputies to protect the property of people who were exploiting them as well. And I think
David, the property were black people. The property that you're talking about were black lives.
Yes.
The property that you're talking about and the profits that were stolen based on free labor that was exercised against the black people were the property.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with all these discussions.
And I'm really just simply trying to demonstrate.
I get it, but I'm just trying to tell you that's very offensive to black people, because black people are the property that we're talking about in this Apple card.
Yeah, and all that I'm doing here is saying that the poor whites who were exploited.
They're not victims, David. They're not victims. They benefit from the same system that the ones that enrich themselves from. The poor white, what I'm trying to say this thing every single day.
Yeah, please don't speak over me. I said that they are what I'm trying to do is expose a system of social control that uses people who are exploited, not enslaved, but exploited, to protect the property of the people who are exploiting them. That is a crucial factor, a crucial element in this. And I think, unfortunately, we don't disaggregate whites. It's hard to do that. It's hard for anybody to do that. I mean, I think that's what Ms. Stahl is saying. White America likes its killer cops, and so there is,
as long as they're killing black people.
Yeah, and in fact, they don't just kill black people; they kill black people disproportionately. So, what I'm looking for as a European American person is a way to address these issues so that I can undermine the use of European American working people as part of a system of social control. And that's really the most important thing that I can do. I mean,
so David, what I have for you is Nina's here, Carl is here, Robbie is here, and we're going to bring them in just a few minutes. But I wanted to give him an opportunity because he is the expert with policing, and I really lean on him, and I appreciate his insight because he was one of them. He comes from this. This is who he is. So he sees this from a perspective that we will never see it. So Ken, I want to give you the final words for what we need to do moving forward, because I know that I don't know what we do on the outside to help. I want to hear what your thoughts are.
I mean, at this point in time, we have laws that are legislated in this country that could address the egregiousness that we saw. We saw a murder committed live, or not live, but recorded. We saw citizens that, based on the same laws in this country, were unfortunately felt as though they were helpless to save a man from being lynched on a street corner, a public street corner, broad daylight on a main street, not someplace out in some desolate, remote place, on a main city street with millions of people that could pass by in a year on a street corner, in front of storefronts, multiple video recordings going, some surveillance video, closed circuit TV, other cell phone. It mattered. None of that mattered. None of that mattered. So we have an institutional problem of the same nature that has always repeated in America. Black people being subjected to brutality that white people are not subjected to. We have Black people being targeted differently than white people. We have inequality, discrimination, racism, all of these practices that go back to the very beginning of the relationship between Black and white people. And we cannot try to circumvent the fact that the low bearing fruit on the tree that gets the least profit from this system, those poor whites, you are still responsible for the other whites gaining all of the money and all of the profit shares because you received a benefit from this system. There's no way to go and dance around that. Today, it is the responsibility of Black people and good, conscientious, upstanding white folks to get together in a room and discuss how we arrest this issue, this problem, finally and for all. It is not about trying to go and say that some white folks who are poor are victimized, because they are not. They're part of the complicit nature of what we face every single day as Black people in America, and it's got to stop.
Give us your website, Ken, so people can find you, reach out to you, and
Certainly. kwillservices.com, www.kwillservices.com.
thank you, Ken. We appreciate having you. Your insight is so valuable, and I thank you for all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
All right. I'm going to bring in the second part of what how I wanted to navigate this broadcast today. We got Nina with us. Good morning, Nina.
Hi, good morning.
We have Carl with us. Good morning, Carl.
Good morning. How are you?
Great, great. Where is she? Miss Robbie. Good morning.
Morning. Good morning.
Good morning. This is heavy. I'm heavy. I feel helpless. Black people, we reach a place where we can't do anything. We protest, then we riot, we loot, we're angry. But nothing changes unless white America changes it. And Ken hit it right on the head. Black people, brown people, and good white people need to come into a room and figure out how we change America. Black people, brown people, white people. How do we change America?
Well, there's probably some good models, out there. I know I was seeing online where the Chattanooga police chief was saying, if telling his officers, well, if you saw that video and you didn't think that was wrong, you need to resign. And there's I'm sure there's other places that are, they're either taking the right, they're making steps in the right direction. There's probably some good models out there that we can get, distributed around to other places. But, police need to, police police the police. Police need, training to de-escalate, to respect, us. They're supposed to be protecting the people. No matter what, race or, whatever, they should be protecting us, and we should feel safe around the police. They need to build trust, with the community so that we can develop safe communities for everybody. It's just unbelievable. Where here you see this video, and obviously that police officer, it was like if he was shooting somebody, it would have been him shooting the person 2 or 3 or 4 times to make sure the person's dead, because he kept his knee on that person's neck, long time after, the person wasn't even moving anymore. I mean, how is that not, how is that not first degree murder? He was intentionally doing that, and plenty of time to cool down and all that. And then the other police that were standing by, it's just unacceptable that they're supposed to be protecting us, and not assuming that we're guilty or we're bad people until proven innocent. And their lives matter more than our lives. They're supposed to be protecting us. So
they protect you. They protect white America. They don't protect us. I have to teach my sons, Carl, that, my sons are driving now. Be mindful. You don't want to ever get stopped by the police, because if you do, I need you to keep your hands on the steering wheel. I need you to say yes, sir, yes, ma'am. I need you to, be mindful that don't move to, I have to teach my sons a whole nother set of rules. So they don't protect Black people.
Right. Well, and if white people don't feel protected, it's much, much, much worse for Black people. So there's just a general, attitude within, at least a lot of the police departments and a lot of the people. And that's the other part, not just better training, but better screening to make sure that we get these people out that, are bigots and that are, they're thugs with a gun and with a badge. And they're it's just unbelievable, and it's good for people, for everybody to see. I think that's what happened with Martin Luther King. He was able to show white society the injustice, and this, the videotapes are being able to show white society the injustice, and people can relate, to they don't want to be that person on the ground. None of us want to be that person on the ground with somebody else.
But I think the more poignant
regard for our life.
I think the more poignant question, though, is would that have happened to a white person if that person was white on the ground? Would 4 officers have held him down with one kneeling on his throat and other officers watching and people filming with a white person on the floor saying, "I can't breathe," and there be a blatant disregard by everyone?
Right.
Well,
I've seen police officers, and I've been, when I was young, when I was like 18 years old, I was roughed up, disrespected by a cop. Unfortunately, or fortunately, where I was at, the store I was at, some of the people in the store and the owner found out about it, and that cop got suspended.
I think that's the difference, though.
And then I've seen 90-pound women being, just roughed up, white women being roughed up, and just for absolutely no reason. There's a general
roughed up and killed is two different things.
Bigger problem. This is not to say that this is only a white problem. This is a much, much bigger problem for Blacks, but it exists for all people. To some level, but Black people are much, much worse.
To your question, Tamara, what do we do? Because the outcry from Black America and people who care about this has now turned into, riots. And what do? We don't allow officers to have immunity. I think David brought it up. We punish officers for microaggressions, because the day that officers are punished for microaggressions, there was a video circulating, Georgia State Patrol literally pulled a handcuffed boy, African-American, up by his hair, literally dragged him. That hasn't been anywhere on the news at all. But if officers are held accountable for smaller, serious assaults, then we may not get to these horrific murders, right? Or assassinations, or whatever you want to call them, on camera. And the other thing that I really hope we stop doing, especially on the level we're doing in Atlanta, is to demonize protesters, to say that these people are thugs and it's wrong. There is an action and a reaction. There is for every behavior, there's a consequence. That is a universal law. And the protesters are reactionary to a consistent line of trauma, of a form of terrorism, I mean, this is not new. It's been going on. The blue shield has been protected. They protect each other. It's happening to certain people, and it has come to a head. And so we should not demonize the people who are reacting to these consistent actions. When you abuse a sentient being, right? When you any sentient being, I mean, literally any animal, person, humans, when you smack somebody, we're first going to cringe. If you do that to a dog, the dog will cringe, then stay away from you. But if you keep doing that and back that sentient being into a corner where that sentient being can't walk, can't literally do anything, which has been occurring, eventually that sentient being will react, respond, defend themselves. And they actually may be aggressive, but that doesn't make their reaction wrong. And I don't think we should be condemning, demonizing protesters, even if they're looting, because there's a tie in these relationships to violence, even in gentrification in Atlanta, and nobody's recognizing that. To say, our mayor literally said, we have businesses now on the West Side, you're destroying your own communities. T.I. and Killer Mike own two people having businesses does not equate regional systemic change. You know, if you include Tyler Perry, that's a great example. The people of those communities, the primary legacy residents, are not being hired. What Tyler Perry did was bring people of more wealth, of more affluence into Oakland City who are buying up those houses, displacing those residents. When you say this is our city, whose city is it? And
Stay there with
why
that thought, Robbie.
Sure.
Stay there with that thought. Whose city is it? Egberto, thank you for joining us. Egberto Willie's politicsdoneright.com. Good morning, Egberto.
Good morning. First of all, great discussions you guys are having. I just want to add a little 2 cents here. First of all, I think there are two things, my humble opinion, premises that we make. Most police officers are good. Not true. Most police officers are not good. As it turns out, the people who become police officers have a particular trait. By the way, we do like that trait in that when we're dealing with bad people, we want the people who are under the law to have that requisite within their character to be bad with those people. So police officers in general, they're not all good. When we fight by that premise, we allow what happens to occur. Now, one of the reasons why Black bodies and Latino bodies and brown bodies take the brunt of the actions from police is that white bodies are protected by law. In other words, if you take a look at a police officer who does something wrong, when he goes in front of a grand jury, the grand jury, because of how people have been programmed in this country, tells them there must be a program that tells them police are good. If the police did this, they must, then those people who were afflicted must have done something wrong. It's not that these grand jury folks are bad, it's that the pre-program within them says that. I heard my brother say that on TV, things like you see white women being pulled by the cops as well. One of the reasons you see that is whenever white people become allies of people of color, they are treated differently by police officers. They get the honor of being a person of color in white skin, just like, we have to understand that, and why is it that makes that creates a reason? Because for the police officers who are not inherently good to continue to exist, they themselves have to have the allies, and those allies are the white base that can keep them. Now, I don't want to jump into the capitalism part where all of that ties in. You know, Carl knows.
There's this, what you just described is the new version of what was the former N lover. People become hate. That is the new version of it.
Yes.
And we, you know, and there's a hierarchy there too. Like, I have been witness to APD viciously attacking. I was involved in a lawsuit, a woman of color who did nothing. She was completely innocent. I was a witness to it. We were a table of women of color. We were all arrested. She never got anything for that. She was maligned. It hit the news. The people who tried to help her, who was a white woman, got in trouble too with a felony. All of those officers defended that officer who was wrong, who profiled her and who attacked her.
Right.
And he was protected by City of Atlanta funds. So to David's point, they have immunity. They're protected under color of the law, and that needs to stop.
Right. There is a symbiotic relationship with power. And, you know, all of this, anybody who watches my show know I always talk about race doesn't really mean anything, right? It's all about power. It so happened that to maintain the power, you have to keep the racial divide. In order to keep the racial divide, one race has to be on top of others. And it so happened that if you are in black skin, brown skin, there's a pecking order that allows you to maintain this sort of a thing. My phrase, when we unite Appalachia, the ghettos and the barrios, that's when we are going to solve the problem. That is a fear that they're trying to eliminate. Now, the problems that we're seeing in Minnesota right now, it's not a problem with the protesters that are doing this damage. There are white supremacists in Minnesota right now targeting black, brown, indigenous businesses and police stations in order to do two things: get rid of that economic base, and number two, make it seems like it's these animals from Minnesota that's destroying their community. Yeah, I'm not saying that there aren't a lot of people within the community that's taking advantage of the looting and taking advantage of all these things. Those things are true, but that is what occurs when people are not listened to, right? In other words, if guess who has a lot of attention now? Minnesota has a lot of attention now. But when they're peaceful, who gives them attention? When bad things happen to them and they remain at peace, they don't get any attention. Yesterday, I said Ali Belchi. Ali Belchi said, the reason I have Ali Belchi in the background right there, is Ali Belchi went on TV and made that statement as well. He went on TV and said, these are people that want action. These are people that, and he said, I see the bad people that are setting fires. I know there are bad people setting fires and doing these bad things, but this is a community that is not listened to, right? And then he says, and he gives a litany of the reasons why this place is exploding. And when I saw that, I was, wow, a mainstream media guy that got it. So I made a video of Ali Belchi and all of that. I put it up. And I DM Ali Belchi and said, hey, thank you, man. And I sent him the video. Ali Belchi wrote back and he said, the same video that you sent me is what the right wing is using to attack me. Because they said, look at the fire around you and look at what Ali Belchi is saying, that these aren't bad people. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
This is where a timeline and history matters. Because I'll give you an example, ironically, and a lot of people may differ with me. Here in Atlanta, you know, our city went to pot yesterday. CNN was on fire. They were originally peaceful protests. It got non-peaceful, etc. Businesses were hit, and there was violence. That being said, and this happened in Buckhead. That being said, the timeline and the history on that, Buckhead is a extremely affluent, one of the most affluent cities and parts of Atlanta. And they have completely been pro-enforcement, lobbying to get rid of judges who don't allow youth a chance to have second chances, creating entire online groups called Fighting Crime in Buckhead and Beyond that our city officials listen to, bringing food to zone officers, lobbying for raises. One of the first things Keisha Lance Bottoms did when she got into office, based on promises to the people of the West Side, was give our officers a raise. Now, if you connect the dots and look at what has happened, when Buckhead says we want people arrested, we want the jails utilized, we want our officers paid, but they fail to support equitable economic development. They fail to allow alternatives for youth. They refuse to support an ATV park and instead want those youth arrested. And when those ATVs are chased and dying on the streets of Atlanta, what do you think the response is going to be?
Stay there, Robbie. Egberto, I know you have to go, but I want to thank you for joining us. You can find Egberto Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Instagram, YouTube, Periscope, Twitter. This man is everywhere. Politics done right with EgbertoWillies.com. Thank you, sir.
Thank you guys for everything that you do. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alberto.
Let me get let
Nina, what's up?
Nina.
Yeah, I mean, there are several things I'm thinking. I'll try to sort of pull things together. One is about the looting. One of the things I thought about was kind of what you, I think Robbie is your name, are addressing. What are the places that are being looted and destroyed? What are the places that aren't being attacked? Because I kind of suspect there's some sort of symbol in there, just like what you were talking about. I mean, Buckhead is a place of affluence and power, and I'm not trying to condone the violence. I'm saying we need to look at why it's happening, where it is, and think about the meaning that that has. So that's one thing I'm thinking about.
And perhaps, if I may, and
Sure.
perhaps the affluence that Buckhead has. I mean, they're called Buckhead Betties. These are women who have a lot of time in their hands, who are for charter schools with a lot of resources. Instead of just focusing on enforcement, jails, higher pay for officers, delivering food to officers, maybe those same people could utilize those resources to assist APD schools, to assist equitable development on the Southwest side, where people have a living wage, gainful employment, and housing. It's in our best interest to effectuate that, but that's not what happened. So now what is that saying? The whatever have come home to roost. Now you're appalled because Buckhead got looted. Now you're appalled. That's the point of you ignoring what is happening in these communities.
So this is another thing that I can touch on. I won't go into the details of it, but I used to do outreach programs in schools all across the metro Atlanta area, public, private, home schools, one county to another. And what I saw over time was how equal schools are. That there's a big difference between what you see on the south side of town and what you see on the north side of town. And I see why all of these things happen the way that they do. And is it any surprise that that kind of inequality comes home to roost in a variety of ways? I mean, it's not just in this one way. It's denying people full access to education. And that has ramifications throughout the rest of their lives and affects us all as a whole culture. So that's another piece of things. I don't remember who brought up about the grand jury, but I was thinking about that because I think it was 8 years ago, I served for 2 months on a grand jury in DeKalb County. You don't get to choose to be or not be on a grand jury. You just get summoned for it. It's a subpoena. And what I could see is too hard to encapsulate in a few words, but I'll try, which is that I could see how there was a whole system of stuff in place there, that it's laws. I mean, you get told right off, you may not agree with the law. You're not here to say whether you agree or disagree with the law. You're here to say something about a true bill or a no bill based on what information we're giving to you. So that's one piece of it. Another piece of it is the district attorneys themselves, who are kind of crafting the charges that they bring against people so that they're shading a story in a particular way. Even so, since grand juries function once the discussion is underway without anybody else there except the citizens, I can say that there were some really interesting and spirited discussions, and there were some things that that there were no bills on, based on some discussions where it felt like what the police were doing was just kind of running something generically through to, in that particular case, to bring charges against several young Black males. I know I'm not giving one final statement. It's just that y'all have touched on so many things that it's hard to kind of pull it all together into one statement. But I also want to say the officer or former officer Ken that was there to start with, he mentioned the picture of the officer with his knee on the neck of the guy and his hands in his pockets. And there was something about that in particular that really affected me a lot, especially because it was such a casual gesture. It's like, sure, I just lean on the neck of somebody for 8 or 9 minutes all the time. It's no big deal. I mean, it was really, there was something about that in particular that just seemed really, really horrible and callous. So that's all I'm going to say.
He didn't see him as human.
No.
Like he totally saw him. This is my catch. I just
Yeah.
my catch of the day. Look at I got. This is my catch of the day.
And once you've got somebody pinned like that, there is no way that somebody can fight back under that. There is no way for them to get out of that. The guy had the total advantage. I mean, it was just horrifying.
Well, and it goes to show too, for all the officers there, like nobody intervened. You know, had it not been for that video, those officers must have believed by their actions that they would not be questioned or reprimanded at all. So you have to wonder, and based on video footage that's released on a daily basis, is this routine? Is this the way people are manhandled, you know, constantly treated? I see videos every day being released where people are cursed at by officers, you know, punched, like just all kinds of assaults, straight out assaults. And I'm not sure that our police officers in leadership are really stepping in and saying, you know what? If you shut off your body camera, you're going to be removed from the force for 2 weeks without pay. And we will review your file and see. I don't see that happening on smaller levels. And so why wouldn't it continue to escalate? And that's what this has manifested into, a large scale, massive protest where people are absolutely sick of it. And when it's the right time, Tamara, when you advise, there was a comment on here about white women. And I want to address that because I think there's a structure in Atlanta, and our mayor's position in what she said publicly in shaming people who are protesting. I think it's very problematic and a consistent theme that's happening in Atlanta. You asked what we could do. And one of the things we can do as people of color is not execute an agenda that does not serve everyone. But I don't know if this is the right moment.
Stay there. Let's let Nina make her comment. Go ahead, Nina.
You touched on something else about the police, and I won't be able to pull up all the details of this either, but 2 or 3 years ago, I started looking into how do we decide what police get trained to do? And there actually is a mechanism in our state. That is a matter of some policy that gets created. And in theory, it seems to me that's some policy that we as citizens in this state have some control over, you know, that it doesn't just happen randomly. And I apologize for not having, you know, links and things lined up, but it was something I looked into several years ago. And that's an area that maybe that's a place to put some pressure on about how do we make decisions about how our police are trained and what they're trained to do.
Yeah, there's a lawyer named Sarah who is part of the Friends meeting and in New Jim Crow Action Committee, who actually wrote a legal training manual for police officers. So, you know, we have progressives. I mean, she did this up in Maine, not here in Georgia, but she has advised an awful lot of people. And, you know, it just seems to me that that there's something that's missing from all of this. All of the efforts at reform, and you know, that one of the things I think is missing is that European Americans like Nina and Carl and I have really not figured out a way of messaging, you know, to other European Americans why it is, and I mean, on this, I just don't agree with Ken. That the benefits are actually illusory for most European Americans. They look like benefits, but in fact, what happens is they come up behind you and they kick you in the in the back of the neck.
So this is where we lean on our white allies to.
Yeah, and I exactly, Tamira, and I mean, I'm struggling to figure it out. I don't think I have all the answers, but the only thing I would say is I would appreciate the room to be able to explore this and not get dumped on as somebody who's defending the white race, or even.
Well, I don't think you were dumped on, David. I think he was really trying to make his point about this.
Yeah, I understand it,
and I really want to take this broadcast. And Carl, do you have a comment that you want to make? Because how do white allies? Because this is not our responsibility as Black and brown people. We're helpless. We've done all we can. We march, we protest, we riot, we loot, we do everything. We've done it all. This is not our fight. This is the fight of white allies. This is your fight.
Well, it's everybody's fight if we all, come together and say,
no, it is not our fight, Carl. We can't. We can't. We've been saying it for 400 years.
I mean, Carl, you just said something when you were speaking about your experience as an 18-year-old, which is so different from an African-American 18-year-old. You were manhandled by the police. The police officer, it was witnessed by store owners, I think you said, and the police officer was disciplined. That it seems to me is something that you should be talking about frequently, and saying that this is the way that anybody should be treated if they are manhandled by the police. So it seems to me that our responsibility in a situation, when we're talking about this kind of thing, is not to say, oh, it never happens, but to say that when it does happen, and it's it's a white youth, there is some recourse. And if other white people were hearing more of that, the contrast between the treatment, there would be some sense that that there's something wrong. There's something wrong, particularly if you say it. So anyway, I just wanted to make one other point. Last night, when in Minnesota, one of the things that I noticed that was really, and I don't know what the outcome actually was, but at a certain point, about 45 minutes after the curfew, the police and National Guard and the state police withdrew from the streets. And there were no fires. There was no looting. There was no burning. People marched down into downtown. So, I think that was it seems to me that the mayor, both, the mayor of Minneapolis and the mayor of St. Paul, decided that that's what they were going to do. And so one of the things that suggests, and I think, is that it's the police that are not the people who are out on the street. And that's also true of almost every situation in which there is a police encounter with civilians. Mostly it's the police.
Let's give Carl a chance to jump in. Carl, because I don't want you to feel like we beat up on you today.
No. I definitely think that this is the tip of the iceberg, in terms of what's actually being caught by video, or, over time, just, being witnessed by somebody that can actually do something about, bad behavior. We need to expose it more. Fortunately, there's more body cams, and, unfortunately, what was her name? Judy? I'm sorry. Anyway, was mentioning that if the police officer turns it off, there should be some consequences, for that. We need to have, we need to create a culture within the police department that they police their own. That when they see unacceptable behavior from other police officers, where they're not, respecting us, and putting their life on the line. They should. I have a 25-year-old with autism. All right, and special needs, people are frequently, killed by, or at least sometimes killed, by police officers because they don't know how to handle a person that can't handle their own behavior. They go out of control. Some of them get shot. Some of them get pinned down. They can't breathe. They die. So even the special needs community, we don't trust, that the police have the right training and the right attitudes to be able to work with our population. So we protect. I basically would put myself in between a police officer and my son if my son was having a problem. Okay, so this is a general problem. It is much, much worse for blacks because there's also the racism element, and then where Alberto was mentioned is there's basically bad people in there, people that we really don't want to have as having that much power over us, to have that power, and there needs to be better screening and all that. This is a complicated issue. It also is economics, where we need to pay a livable wage, give people hope. We need to build trust between police departments and communities, so that bad actors can be reported, and the good part of the community can work against the elements that are bringing it down, causing people need a livable wage. They need dignity in their life. They need safety in their life, and I think we can do it. I think there's models out there. There's probably some. I'm assuming that there's a bunch of police officers within the Atlanta Police Department that don't like what's going on. There's probably there may be areas, even in black areas of Atlanta, where there are good relationships between the police and the community. Those models need to be found and replicated. And then where the police chiefs, but it's white community, and it's white that need to take leadership, in this. We're the majority, and at least for now, and we need to have that expectation within our own, for our police departments and so on, to respect everybody. There's just no ifs, ands, and buts about it. We need to have, every person deserves, just simple dignity.
I like what you're saying, Carl. I think social currency and political influence and allies utilizing, those resources to demand that, officers have appropriate mental health training, that they're going to have departments that we restructure where if an officer reports a problem, they're not fired. We should literally bring back officers who have done the right thing. We see these accounts everywhere. And how are we going to protect officers who come forward? Because that's a reality. If you report something, then you're seen as a quote unquote snitch. And now will people turn their back on you? And will you be at risk in the street as an officer? So all of these problems can lead to direct solutions. And people who have affluence, who have resources, can be allies and demand that restructuring in our police force. And diversity training, because it's only as good as what that individual officer who has the authority perceives. If he perceives Black teens who are, 5'9" as a threat, he's going to react to that person as a threat, as opposed to, for example, the shooter who was a young, white, thin male. He was taken out and given Burger King, after a shooting. So the treatment, the disparate treatment, is we have to acknowledge that these are cumulative and layered problems, and that to some degree, gentrification, diversity, lack of equity, the lack of resources in minority communities are a form of violence, and they are cumulative. And when we take people to the lengths that they're in a corner, can't jog while being Black, can't talk, can't go to the park or barbecue while being Black, can't live while being Black, there will be a reaction, and we don't have to justify it, but we can certainly understand it and not demonize it, not say it's wrong, don't do that. It's, that's not the solution here at all. And
Robbie,
I know, Tamara, we're about to be done, but at some point, maybe next one, this structure at the NPU level, the bottom up, the information, the people who are in authority, that placing a person who looks like you to execute an agenda is just as problematic. And I believe that is what our mayor did by shutting down and saying those people were wrong. I don't know that that's helpful.
all right, I just got a really good
David,
suggestion.
can you sum it up in 30 seconds? We have about
Yeah.
seconds left in the bar.
What Carl is saying about being afraid for his son. One of the things that does is, to me, is it follows a strategy of what I call disaggregating whites. Carl is a member of a community, the parents of people with autism. They have genuine fears for their children being, their adult children being out. That seems to me the basis for an act of solidarity, not allies, but an act of solidarity. Mobilize the parents of adult children with autism to join with African Americans in this struggle against the police use of force. We need to disaggregate whites. We need to break down the white race. And by class and by any other means or other interests that could bring people into solidarity with African Americans and with other people of color. And it's not going to be the rich people, Robbie. I'm sorry. The rich people are not going to do that. They have an interest. They have a stake in the system. I'm looking for people who don't. So, that's
Well,
where
Buckhead has a stake. They got burned down. They're afraid to come out. They feel like they are under siege with crime. And to your point, David, elite people of color should not execute agendas that are inequitable. Do not be the face of an inequitable agenda for personal gain.
That's not what
And we are at the top. We are at the top of the hour. It always gets hot at the last minute. I am Tamara Johnson Shealy, candidate for the United States Senate. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Ken and Egberto and Nina and Carl and of course David and the beautiful Robbie Caban. Thank you guys for coming on and we're having this conversation. We got to keep speaking truth to power, and I really keep leaning on our white allies. I keep leaning on you guys to get this right. Black people, we are helpless. We've reached a place and a point where America doesn't hear us. They don't hear us until we burn it down. So, we need you to speak truth to power. We need you to get on the forefront. This is, it will take Black people and brown people and white people together to really hold America and hold these police accountable. So I want to thank you for joining us. You can find Mr. David Slavin at Acknowledge the Divide right here on Facebook. You can find Miss Robbie Caban at robbiecaban.com. And Carl, give us your website.
www.votereducationproject.com.
All right. And Miss Nina, I know you're working on your yoga stuff, so we'll be sharing that here just
Okay.
a bit. Do you have a website yet?
I have one for my art, and I'd rather not put that up.
Okay, we're going to talk about a website.
Okay.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us on this broadcast. We will see you next week. It's going to be another hot topic. ADOS will be joining us from across the country next week, and I'm sure they have a lot to say on this topic. So be safe. And David?
Yeah.
Power to the people.
Power
to the people, everybody.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Thanks.